there's 25 golf courses that Raynor built that are no longer there, that were fully operational. And, these weren't just, on a drawing board. These were courses that people played, and whether it was the Great Depression or World War II or, like I say, growth of the surrounding area and municipal planning or whatever it was, but we've lost 25 of them. And, so that's a shame. So yeah, each and every one of them I would have liked to play.
The golf courses of Seth Raynor. Let me get some friends to help me lift this up for the camera, Michael. Look at this beautiful book.
Yeah.
This wonderful. It's handsome. Congratulations, man.
Thanks. Yeah. It's been a labor of love, but I've enjoyed it. Yeah, it's been fun. It's kind of been new to me, first time. And John Cavalier's photography definitely carrying the bulk of the rave reviews, I think. And I just tried not to let him down with my writing. So that's kind of how this thing's gone. But it's been fun. We tried to get to every Seth Raynor course still around, and John, I think, made it to all but 3 of them to photograph them. And it's been about 3 years in the works, so it's been a learning process. But we're happy with the outcome, and we're certainly happy that everybody's been enjoying it so far. Okay.
As you should be. And that is no small feat, getting to all these golf courses. I definitely want to talk about, and it's interesting now, John has to come out from behind Links Gems, sort of
a little bit.
Now folks might put a name to a handle. Same for yourself, Bama Bearcat. But I want to get into the process of writing this and collecting all this. It's comprehensive. It's very readable. It's thorough. For any golf head or architecture geek, it's really wonderful. But I want to start with, for maybe someone who's not an architecture geek, there are people, believe it or not, out there who might not know who Seth Raynor is, who might not know Charles Blair McDonald and Seth Raynor. So tell us a little bit about who they are, their connection, and why they are so important.
Sure. So, let's start with C.B. McDonald. So C.B. McDonald is, I think he would like to still be thought of as the godfather or the grandfather of golf in America, and he probably earns that title. He was born in Canada actually, but he grew up in Chicago. He went over to St. Andrews for school. His grandfather was a professor at the University of St. Andrews, and he literally got his first set of golf clubs and golf lessons from old Tom Morris. So as far as American golf and the link back to, the birthplace of the game, C.B. McDonald, Charles Blair McDonald, was that guy. And whether it was the formation of the USGA or Chicago Golf Club, which was the first 18-hole golf course in the United States, C.B. McDonald's one of those guys who just kind of had his, fingers in everything. He was certainly a very outspoken person. He wasn't afraid to let his thoughts be known on how things should go. And, in a lot of ways, his efforts were to bring what he thought were the most important parts of the game, that he learned in St. Andrews: pace of play and the idea of, how the rules would work, and that it's not supposed to be a game that's fair for everyone. It's kind of the rub of the green and things like that. And he also had that idea with golf courses. I think as golf became more popular in the United States, obviously Harry Vardon and Francis Wilmette and all that happened in 1913. But even before that, as the growth was happening kind of right at the turn of the century, McDonald always had this dream of building, his ideal golf course. And it started kind of as a, like a lot of us do, sitting around, a grow room or whatever, and talking about what are the best golf holes. And he kind of ignited a discussion about that in a magazine over in the UK. And he just kind of grew it from there. And by the time he got to, just after the turn of the century, he was in a position financially and in his career and life that he wanted to try it. So he made several trips over to Scotland, England, France, and kind of studied the best holes and wanted to really bring that back to America and create kind of what he thought was going to be a blueprint, hopefully, for American golf courses going forward. And I think in a lot of ways he was successful. And then just by luck and chance, the guy that he helped, he hired to build his first course was a guy working in Southampton as an engineer named Seth Raynor. And Raynor had never played golf, didn't know a lot about golf at the time, but was a very talented guy. And, the book is mostly about Seth Raynor's work, but it's also kind of about this yin and yang between C.B. Macdonald, who was this outspoken guy who could rub people the wrong way, but who traced his background in golf all the way back to Old Tom Morris and St. Andrews. And he's paired with this guy who was polite and hardworking and earnest, but knew nothing about golf. And so I think that that pairing, was interesting. And then, the other thing that that the book, covers a lot is obviously their recreation of the ideal golf holes. And again, this wasn't like, some cheesy golf course you'd see in Myrtle Beach or something where they're trying to build like an exact replica of the 12th hole at Augusta National or the 18th hole at Pebble Beach or something like that. Macdonald really wanted to study why these holes were good and what made him like them and other people like them, and then bring that back and incorporate it into his designs. And so it wasn't just that they were going to build the exact same holes over and over, but that they were going to use these certain features of the holes they liked. And, you can call them template holes or ideal holes or template features, whatever. We kind of cover that in the book as well. But the overarching theme is it worked, right? The courses are, a lot of them are getting ready to turn 100 years old, and people enjoy playing them, and they're fun to play. And there's definitely been a huge renaissance in the last 30 years, I would say, of, not just golf course architecture in America, but also specifically with C.P. Macdonald and now Seth Raynor. And we're hoping, that this book will help continue that and continue to promote that, because I like his courses, and I think most people will too.
I think most people do, and I certainly think it should do that. And certainly there was a book that seemed to do that for Charles Blair Macdonald and it's referenced in I think in the introduction here, The Evangelist of Golf by George Botto. So there's sort of the seminal like book on Macdonald, but there was no Raynor book. And so was that the impetus for this? Did you feel like, okay, we need a Raynor story? George Botto is a fascinating story to me as well. I don't know. I know John knew him. John
dry cleaner in New Jersey. As you can see behind me, I like books. I think most people that follow me online know that's kind of where I come from, and this is certainly not from a writing angle or from a reporting and things like that. I just like to read books, and this has kind of been the one that's been missing on the shelf. Seth Raynor, most golf course architects from the golden age, meaning back in the early 1900s up until the Great Depression and the outbreak of World War II, most of them wrote books about their thoughts on golf course architecture, on how to plan a course strategy wise, and then also how to actually build the things, get them out of the ground. And they often did it because they had pretty big egos. But the other reason they did it was they used it as like sales and marketing tools. Raynor, didn't do it. I think probably for a couple of reasons. Number one, he wasn't a golfer, and he didn't have any real firm beliefs of his own, as far as we know. It was mostly, because he wasn't a golfer, he was kind of going off of what Macdonald had taught him. And Charles Blair Macdonald had written, a book about golf courses or a couple chapters in his book, Scotland's Gift. But also, I think, because Seth Raynor didn't need any more work. He was, Charles Blair Macdonald was this wealthy guy who built his ideal course up in Long Island, which is the National Golf Links of America. And then he built 4 or 5 or 6 other courses for close friends of his. Most of them had ties to National Golf Links, one way or the other. But pretty soon he said, "Hey, I'm not like, I don't want to get into this full time, but I've got this guy working for me who's very talented, named Mr. Seth Raynor, and I'll send him, to New Orleans or to Cincinnati or wherever to build you a golf course. And I think you'll be happy with his work." And so Raynor really had a pretty full pipeline, which is a pretty envious position for, any golf course architect, to getting into the business. He was a guy who was really busy from the day he started, in the profession. And so the idea of like trying to advertise his services or, advocate for his specific ideas on how to build a course, which is something he didn't need. So he never wrote a book. So there was never an original book from Raynor. And then as it applies to kind of the modern library and the reporting on things like that, I mean, Tom Doak wrote a great book about, and some friends of his wrote a great book about Alistair Mackenzie, and Jeff Shackelford wrote what I think is just a fantastic biography about George C. Thomas and his work, and Brad Klein with Donald Ross, and you kind of go on and on. But Raynor was the one that was always missing. And as you say, there was this dry cleaner in New Jersey who was fascinated with stuff long before any of us, before the internet, before any of that stuff. And Mr. Botto, I never got to meet him, but he wrote, a book about C.B. Macdonald that really, I think it helped to jumpstart interest in this, and really just, if nothing else, helping to kind of catalog what he had found out about what courses were still left that those he had been involved in. There were always, he had intended to make it a 3-part series where it was going to be, the first book was going to be about Macdonald, the second book was going to be about Seth Raynor, and then the third book was going to be about Charles Banks, who was kind of a protege of Seth Raynor. There were some notes that he did, and those have kind of been passed around within the community. Rand Morissette from Golf Magazine and Tom Coyne, I think, his was a friend of George's and saw some of those notes and things like that. But it kind of started and stopped over the last 25 years and nothing happened. And finally, I think we just kind of got tired of waiting. And when John told me, I've only got like 5 Raynor courses left to go see. And I we started figuring out, well, how many are there? And, and trying to document some of the stuff. And we thought, well, let's try it. If we want to read it, even if nobody else wants the book, at least, we'll at least have it for ourselves. And that's really, that kind of has been the approach, is like, well, what would we want to read about this? And for me, it's, the book is much less about, Charles Blair Macdonald as a person or Seth Raynor. We try to tell you enough to give you your background on how they approach this, but it's really about their work, the golf courses that are left. I mean, it's not a deep dive biography where we're telling you, the names of the ships that he sailed on to, when he went here or there, a lot of dates for this or that. It's mostly about the golf courses that he built. And I think that that's probably, the best way to remember him is what he left behind. And, I've enjoyed the renaissance that these things have had over the last 30 years, people, restoring them and rebuilding them and the appreciation for them. And I'm definitely in that wave of people that have kind of just, sought them out over the last 2 decades and wanted to learn more and more and more about.
There's so many people, rediscovering Raynor and all the Golden Age architects, and but that's really what makes it such a fun read as you go through, and you're looking for the courses you've played or courses you want to play. That you do deep dives on all the Raynor courses out there. There are more than I thought there were, far more than C.B. Macdonald is credited with. Let's just throw out some names so people who are listening who might not know. Do I know a Raynor course? Have I played one? What are some of the big names that? I guess we could go through the table of contents, but it's quite long. What are some of the courses people are definitely going to know? Yeah.
So let's see. Macdonald and Raynor. Macdonald designed 7 courses that Raynor built, and then on his own, Raynor built 34 courses that are still around today. And then there were another 25 courses that he built that are no longer around today. Either the course is completely gone or it's been redesigned. So there are still about 41, 42 courses that you can still play. And then there's another, like I say, there's another 25 in the book that we cover that were built and they're gone. And we've tried to dig up old photos and things of those. And then to me, the most tantalizing section is there's a whole chapter 4 of the book, which is in the back, which is the designs that he made that were never built, either because, he had passed away or because, the Great Depression hit and people, were running out of money or whatever it was. And, I find those fascinating as well. He designed a lot of second courses. There was supposed to be a second course at Yeamans Hall. There was supposed to be a second course at Yale. There was supposed to be a second course at Mid-Ocean and Fisher's Island. And you think wow, what would a second course at Fisher's Island, how cool would that have been on the other side of the island, So things like that were interesting to dig into. So it's the names. I mean, like I say, it's big names. It's big name clubs. Macdonald was an extremely wealthy guy. I mean, he was hanging around, he was Wall Street and he was hanging around with JP Morgan and names like that. And so a lot of the work that Seth Raynor inherited were for wealthy people and they were all for private clubs. And, I think a promising thing and something that I certainly think is a very positive development in the world of golf is that these things were behind, I think I wrote they're behind lock gates and manicured hedges, for about 3/4 of a century. And really something that's really helped, I think, with the renaissance of appreciation for Seth Raynor is that it's easier to see his work now. I think because of the developments in technology, with drone photography and just digital image taking in general, somebody like John Cavalier, you don't have to get up on a ladder behind every tee and take 3 photos and then get back to your studio and develop the film and hope a couple of them turned out okay. John can take 3 or 4 or 5,000 photographs in a half of a day and pick the ones that he thinks best show off the course. And I think that even at the most private of courses, whether it's Chicago Golf Club or National Golf Links America or wherever, I think once the membership and once the people that make the decisions about those places, once they saw that, okay, this is these new guys with these flying helicopters that they're calling drones, once they understood that, like, oh, these guys are here because they love the architecture and they're showing our club and our golf course in the best light, they're a little bit more willing to do it. And John Cavalier was he was an early adopter of that. And I think he, because of that, he just kind of got his name out there and the Links Gym's name out there. And, a lot of clubs that, you wouldn't have been able to, get a camera into 20 years ago are now willing to. And I think that's true also with, it's like the stuff that, Golfers Journal does. I mean, the kind of the societies that have developed. I love that. I think it's a positive development where you guys are taking a group of 50 golfers on a Monday when the course is closed. And I think that's a win-win. The club involved gets some revenue and there's 50 or 60 or 80 people that get to go play one of these private courses that, they would have had no access to 20 or 25 years ago. And now some pretty great golf courses are letting people on, at least a couple times a year. And I think that's a great model, that it still preserves the privacy of the club and the membership, but it also, lets people that really love it and are interested in it, get inside and get a chance to play them. So, yeah,
absolutely.
Great. Yeah.
I agree. It is great. We had a great group at Sleepy Hollow this year, CB McDonald. Well, looking at the book though, there were some, I learned some courses that I thought were McDonald or Raynor. I might have had them backwards, but that's why it's great to read. But we were able to get folks out to Sleepy. We have some more McDonald and Raynor courses on our 2024 offering that will be dropping very soon. Very excited about that. So thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. And when folks are at those courses, they have, as you mentioned, the chance to play these things people hear about: template holes, ideal holes, etc. Mm-hmm. It's become a bit of a buzzword among GCA folks. Yep. I don't know, out of good or bad, but tell me what we're talking about when we say temp, because I think one of the great things the book does is that you pull out examples from some of the courses and explain, okay, this is a Cape hole, this is an Ede, and things like that. Explain what the templates are and maybe describe some of them for us.
Sure. So, neither Seth Raynor or Steve McDonald ever used the word template. That's just a modern word that's been used. Some of the diehards hate that word because it kind of, it implies that it's just like they found a formula and now they're just doing it over and over and over again. Right. I wrote a little essay, poking a little bit of fun at that argument on page 10 of my book. There's just a little essay called "Our Template Holes Ideal," just kind of telling everybody, hey, let's take a deep breath on that one. Like, this is not that serious of a topic. Let's have some fun here. But the ideal holes or templates or whatever you want to call them, it's really more about features. So again, Stephen McDonald, he went over to UK. He saw, whether it was a hole at Brancaster or a hole at the old course in St. Andrews or whatever. And they didn't try to replicate, every inch of that hole from tee to green and all the slopes and everything like that. It was basically just kind of the design style. So whether it's on an Alps hole, the idea of, hitting over a large, object, whether it's a side of a mountain or it's a sand dune or wherever it is, depending on, where the course is, to a blind green or a punch bowl green. That's, it looks like a punch bowl. I mean, the lowest spot is in the middle of the green and everything kind of funnels towards the middle. And, they use different features like that in different combinations. So you can go to one Seth Raynor course and there's an Alps hole design that has a punch bowl green, like at National Golf Links America. And then you can go to another Seth Raynor course where he uses a punch bowl green, but he uses it on par 3. not on a par 4. There's Redans. A Redan is a hole borrowed from North Biarritz where the ball is meant to kind of run along the ground once it lands, and they typically would go from short right to back left on a par 3, and so you're kind of playing a little draw into it, and hopefully it takes kind of the kicker, they call it, or the slope of the green, and can funnel to a back left pin. People get to see that on TV once a year out at one of Seth Raynor course on TV every year out at Wailea, the 17th hole that they have there. It's the 8th hole for the members, but 17 on TV, and you can see the pros trying to do it. They're kind of fun to do because it's pretty easy to understand the strategy. The addictive thing about it, or the fascinating thing, I think, is how they apply those ideal designs to different places. And so, it's still the basic kind of risk reward strategies and just, pretty easy to understand what's going on, or what if there's 2 routes to the hole, which one is, what the risk is and what the benefit is, is pretty easy to understand after one player or two. But to me, the fascinating part, and the thing I hope people enjoy about the book and the photography, is how well really Seth Raynor, a genius that he was, in applying those to so many different settings. I mean, you have Metairie down in the outskirts of New Orleans. Metairie it's the flattest golf course I've ever seen. I mean, there can't be 5 feet of elevation change over the entire golf course. But it's the same hole designs as Fisher's Island, which is, on this just spectacular, small island right off of the coast of Connecticut, versus, Chicago Golf Club, which is essentially out in the prairie. It's out in the field, on the outskirts of Chicago. And, some things that you'll see in the book from the photographs look very familiar from one place to another. You'll recognize, as you page through. And I kind of like the ones that I hadn't played, when I see some of John's photographs, and I realize, oh yeah, that looks exactly like this hole from Chicago Golf, or this looks like from the creek or from Piping Rock or whatever. But it's different agronomy, and it's different. Some of these things are right next to the water where there's constantly wind. Some of them are in, the middle, Mountain Lake, which is in the middle of Florida, and just how they apply the different agronomy, whether it's bent grass or Bermuda grass or whatever. And it's interesting to me, the talent that they had for applying those, basically like, 20, 22, 24 different, ideal designs or template features, whatever you want to call them, how they use them in different combinations at different golf courses, and made them apply so well, no matter where they were and what the agronomy was and kind of what the demand was. I found that pretty fascinating. Pretty talented guy, I think.
No doubt, and deserving of a book like this. And it was interesting to read things I thought about some of the ideal holes, like that a cape hole is not just about the drive, because
right.
you see that kind of. So when we're talking about a cape hole, you think, oh, it's one of those bite off as much as you want kind of, driving holes, but that it's really more about the features in the green, which was interesting to me.
Yeah, it is. You see a lot of, Florida courses, good and bad, where there's this, you're kind of driving diagonally from the tee over a body of water to a fairway that's kind of sloped diagonally away from you, and you got to decide how much you want to bite off. Well, Raynor and McDonald, they did design some holes like that, but that really was not the main point. The main point of a cape is that the entrance to the green is only, there's only like a quarter of the green that's accessible, easily accessible, and the rest of it's surrounded by, either water or sand or a built up mound. And again, I like the differences on that. There's a, whether you're at some place that, you see one in the book that you've never heard of before, or there's a famous one like Chicago Golf or whatever. It's interesting how they achieve the same basic strategic principle. In some places, they could work with what they had to make a great cape hole, like the most famous one probably, which is the 5th hole at Mid-Ocean, which has been photographed and painted and, seen, widespread over the last 75 years or whatever. But then you go to these, small little places in New Jersey or New York, and you've never heard of it, but you get there and, oh yeah, there it is. Like that's the same thing, only they've built up a 5-foot mound because they didn't have an ocean or a lake or, sand trap nearby, and it was or they just had some leftover dirt from another hole, and so they just built up, essentially a a mound around 3/4 of the hole. And I think that's, it's interesting. It's interesting to see. And I think John's photography, cool. I think, does a really good job of showing that off. And like I say, I've tried to put into words some of that myself.
So what was the process in doing this? I mean, I'm really interested in, I've never done a book like this. So how does it come about? I mean, there's a lot of photography, a lot of, great photography, a lot of writing. There are 3 names on the cover. So how did you divide up the work? How did you get to all these places? How did you write about, how did you collect? I mean, you say John was able to get to all or most of them. Yeah. Did you need to get to all of them as well? What was the process like?
Well, it was a good excuse to get to as many of them as I could. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know that deal.
Explained to my wife that this was absolutely necessary for work purposes. I think it was just, so a lot of them started off kind of almost as like book reports where I had, a copy of their club history or something. And really, my library at my home, the course history books are what I like to collect the most, books about golf architecture or club history books. And I have found, there was definitely kind of a trend over the last 10 years or whatever, that the books that people would ask to borrow from me or like call me and say, hey, could you look something up for me? It was a lot of Seth Raynor courses that I found I was pulling from the shelves and, checking on something for somebody. And so it kind of started there. And then, for the courses we knew about and kind of just trying to identify, okay, what makes this course unique from all the other Seth Raynor courses and what do we really want to focus on? Is it something like, Stephen McDonald when he designed, St. Louis Country Club, they had a polo field in the back. And so that made the routing a little bit tough because of where the polo field sat and, how did they deal with that issue? And the answer was it's one of the rare McDonald or Raynor courses that have 5 par 3s. Usually there were the 4 standard par 3s of Biarritz and Eden, Redan, in the short hole. And, for that one, they put in a 5th hole, that was, because the land behind the polo field essentially was they couldn't get, par 4 or par 5s back there. So they put back-to-back par 3s that are kind of on the underneath or south, I guess, of the polo field. So just kind of, things like that. I did start out like trying to build this huge spreadsheet and kind of document where they put each template on each course and see like, were there trends on, did they use certain templates more than others? Was there, were there interesting examples like at Greenbrier where, they finished with a short hole, a short par 3, meaning, a short, for those that don't know, it's a par 3 and it's almost like an island where the green is typically surrounded completely by either a bunker or water or, something. And, the Greenbrier is the only one that ends, with an 18 hole that's a par 3 and it's a short hole. We didn't find a whole lot of trends of like, they always made the first hole, this or that. Really the only one we really would pick up is there's a par 5, template or design feature called a long. And, longs were typically used either on the 9th or 18th holes of a lot of courses. But other than that, we found a lot of one-offs, that we found interesting. Why did they pick, Metairie to build back-to-back par 5s for the 17th and 18th holes? It's the only Raynor course where it ends on a back-to-back par 5, just things like that would kind of stick out. Mm-hmm. We try to give the reader a little bit of like the who, what, where, like who built the course, who hired Raynor in the first place, how long was he there? The records are terrible. Raynor didn't save any records. So, trying to just, we didn't try to be the final arbiter in each case of, does Raynor deserve 80% of the credit for Gibson Island and Charles Blair McDonald deserves 20% or at Yale, was it 50-50? Was it 60-40? That's lost to history and anybody who's ever built a golf course, even the golf courses today, they call them a Tom Doak golf course or a Gil Hans or whatever, but there's a whole army of people that are driving bulldozers and contributing ideas to those guys. And it's, or Corin Crenshaw, is Kapalua, is it 60% Ben Crenshaw and 40% Bill Core or vice versa? That's, to us, that was not interesting for the book. The more interesting thing was, why did it get built? What did they build? How does what they built compare to what is still there today? How much of it is basically still there today? And then just kind of give you a sense, is it a quiet, sleepy neighborhood club, in upstate New York that's, is mostly used by families and just for fun golf, or is it someplace, that's held, the Walker Cup and U.S. amateurs and things like that, and is one of the real blue bloods of golf, or is it someplace like Metairie that was, completely destroyed by a hurricane and had to be rebuilt by Brian Silva, and we talk about that process. So yeah, they've all got their own little story, and we tried to give each one of them, enough pages to tell the story without making this thing a 900-page long book. So that was that was kind of my process. I'd like to ask you some about your process, because this is my first time trying to tackle anything like that. The one big mistake that I think I made that I'm kind of curious from you is when I was like starting the basic research on each course and each club and everything, I would take the notes like on paper, and then like when I tried to go back and type it, and I would do one course at a time, like it created so much double work. I should have just typed it like right into the computer. And, as I found interesting things, I should have just like typed a sentence at a time and then figured out how to arrange the sentences afterwards. But I don't know. Is that something you do? And I also I realized like I've started way too many times. Like I thought way too much like about the first sentence or 2 or 3 sentences I was going to write. And I always have a hard time like ending the chapters, like figuring out as a relatively newbie writer. I find it much easier to start than it is to wrap something up.
Well, no, I mean, beginnings and endings are everything, right?
Yeah.
Because readers can forget everything that happens in the middle can be an accident, or readers can skip it or forget it. But first lines and last lines for readers and for authors as well, that's where it's at. Yeah. So they occupy, I mean, yeah, for me personally, they occupy, 80% of the time is openings and closings. So yeah, I'm there with you. It's interesting when you talk about take notes turning into pages, because say like with the America book, I had 500 pages of notes, mostly dictated from the road. And I remember reading through it and, but never really looking at it again. But it was the material was a little different as well. I would consult the notes when I needed facts and yardages and things like that, but that doesn't sort of, in a memoir sort of narrative, that doesn't come up as much. So the notes were sort of there as a backup for me. And that's still what they are with the book I'm working on now. I always feel like if it's something that in your memory doesn't come back to you clearly, or it's not something like ready to fall out of your mouth like a story to tell, then it's not probably worth telling. But I mean, the goal of what you're doing here is collecting a lot of history and information as well. So so it's a little bit of a different trajectory. However you did it.
The hardest part is definitely trying to boil it down, and that's really so. The third man in this Fight Club is Jim Sitar, who Jim runs Back Nine Press.
Yeah, I want to make sure we
absolutely.
Jim.
And Jim's named on the book because he was the one that was completely responsible for, number one, this thing being done in time for Christmas this year and not in time for Christmas of 2029. And also he was the one that was responsible for making sure that this thing didn't end up being about 800 pages long. So he had the difficult task of taking, my research and my, drafts that were, always too long, more than, he would constantly remind me like, well, we can do this, but if we do 10 pages on this club, then we got to cut 2 pages from this club, or, and so it was really, he was the one that was really helpful in kind of sticking with the page budgets. We literally had a page budget of, trying to figure out okay, we know these 15 clubs are pretty big name clubs that people are interested in, or maybe there just hasn't been a lot of stuff that people have seen of those clubs before. And then there's some other places that, maybe they've only got 4 or 5 holes left that are still original Raynors, or maybe it's a club that's been discussed widely and kind of, I think, there's other information out there for people if they really want to go get it. And so maybe on those, we try to cut a little bit. The other thing that Jim, I think he did a great job with, Jim edits and produces books, that I would have never thought of. And it was, and John has mentioned to me, John Cavalier has mentioned to me, it's different than what he normally does, on social media or whatever is. I think Jim did a really good job with the book too, of reminding us, you don't want to use the best photo from each course, and you don't want because it kind of, people become numb to it if like every photograph looks like it was taken on the 4th of July, like with a, a wonderful blue sky and in white clouds, dotting the background and everything kind of dark green. John takes gorgeous photographs and he makes any golf course look good, but Jim did a pretty good job of reminding us that, like, hey, if somebody's going to sit down and go through, 5 or 6 courses at a time, or if they're really into it and they're going to read 100 pages of this book, all in one sitting, they're going to kind of become numb to the photos, and none of them are going to stand out if they all, no matter how great the photos are, if they all kind of look the same. And so Jim was the one that was really good at, giving some readers a sense of, like, some of these courses that are in, up in New England or in, New Jersey or wherever, what it's like to be there on a fall day when the leaves are already off the trees and, the grass is starting to show a little yellow, versus what it's like to be at Fisher's Island on a bluebird day, in the middle of the summer when the wind's blowing 5 miles an hour and there's, yachts bobbing out in the distance, and it is the ideal time to play it. And he did, I think he did a real good job of, or what's it like springtime in Minnesota when, things are just starting to pop. And so I think Jim did a really good job, and that, I wouldn't have thought of. And, I think I'm speaking for John Cavalier there. Jim did a good job of kind of helping to, not just with the editorial process of My Chicken Scratch, but also, John's, making him understand there needs to be kind of almost like a storyline with the photos themselves, that it's not all the greatest hits. It's also, showing some things from different angles and different, views on things.
You cannot put a price on a good editor, or a photo. Same for a photo editor as well. So kudos to Jim and Back Nine Press as well. They're doing really exciting stuff. Like this book, The Golf Courses of Seth Raynor. I saw a recent Twitter post from you that listed some interesting stuff. Courses, the 3 courses that surprised you the most. The courses that weren't built, and the courses you wish you had more time to research. So I want to ask you about those. And that was kind of the fun of reading this for me, is, to book courses I hadn't heard of or had no idea they were associated with Seth Raynor. So the surprise courses you list is Morris County, Rock Spring, and Knollwood. Tell us about those courses.
Yeah. So Morris County was founded by women and run by women. It was a ladies golf club, formed by a group of very interesting ladies that, to get exercise and something to do in their community. It was incredibly important club in early American golf. I'd seen the name before, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. And I mean, they hosted, U.S. amateurs and women's U.S. Opens, in the 1800s. So they had several kind of rudimentary golf courses, and they had to move a couple of times. And that's a theme that's in the book with a lot of clubs. Is a lot of times Raynor didn't necessarily build these clubs' first golf course. They had a golf course that was like laid out by members or something. It was 9 holes. And then they would acquire a plot of land and they would decide, okay, we've been playing, essentially just out in this field with some holes in the ground for the last 10 years. Now we've got an extra 50 acres, whatever. It's time to, hire an expert to build our new course. And so Raynor was involved in a lot of those type projects. But yeah, so Morris County was definitely, run by women, for women, played by women, and an interesting history where they were involved with USGA right from the early days and hosting big tournaments. So yeah, that's what caught my attention about Morris County.
Very cool. What about, where's Rock Spring?
Rock Spring is in Orange. I believe it's called Orange County. I'm not sure if that's a township or the city's name. It's a public Raynor. If you look at the photos in the book, or if Tom wants to put one up with this, they're absolutely spectacular. Some of the Raynor holes that are still there, and just wonderful. Public course, municipal course. So it was a private club. Went through some reorganizations and a merger that apparently didn't work out so well. And I guess the town or the municipality of Rock Spring or Orange County, they own the club and they've been operating as a municipal. And I had no idea that there was a Seth Raynor course that you could get to, an hour, within an hour's drive of Manhattan, that anybody could play, as just a municipal course.
It's in New York?
Yeah.
New York, Orange County. New Jersey. Oh, Orange County, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Well, there you go,
it's
folks.
in northern New Jersey. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Had no
Well,
idea. So that was a good one.
neither did I. My wife's from up there. Okay.
Yeah.
Put that on the list. Where's Knollwood?
So Knollwood that was one I didn't know anything about. I'd never heard of Knollwood. That was one where, as we were trying to compile them and figure out like, which ones of these are real, Raynors, which ones think they're Raynors, which ones, it was among the last ones I worked on. And like I say, I'd never heard of Knollwood until we started working on this book. And then lo and behold, John drives up there and takes the photos. And I literally texting with him, he's in the parking lot, and I say, is there anything left? Like what's there? What's, whatever. And, no response from John. And then like 30 minutes later, he's like, holy shit, you should see this place. And so it was, it was, the photos in the book are just, that's one of those there, it's not all there and intact. It's not all original. And we kind of describe that, but the some of the holes that are there are just, they're just, spectacular. There's an Eden, that's kind of an elevated raised version of an Eden par 3. It's almost like a blend between an Eden and a short, in that it's completely surrounded. 75% of the green is surrounded by a bunker it looks like something from Langford and Rowe. It looks like one of the deeper bunkers that I've ever seen on Langford around a Raynor course, and one of the steepest slopes on this. I think it's the 16th green there. Kind of sits back in the corner. It's just a fascinating hole. So that's no. It was. I'm looking right now.
Did we say what state that's in?
Yeah, Elmsford, New York. It's in New York. It's in Elmsford. Another
New York course. Okay.
Yeah. He did a lot around there. I mean, it was a lot of. Yeah. He also built a lot of. The National had a lot of wealthy members. In fact, one of my favorite little fringe Raynor things that's in the book, all the way in the very back of the book, is he built like 5 different golf courses for guys like in their backyards. Guys that were wealthy enough to have their own golf course. Some of them were like 3 holes, with different sets of tees, so you could play them in different setups and stuff. But he'll build a course for a guy that was a member at Newport, and there were 9 holes right next to Newport that was in a guy's backyard, and he owned them and decided, and he had his own tournament there and invited some of the best players to come play in his annual tournament and things like that. So again, I just kind of stumbled across stuff along the way. And if I found it interesting, I figured the readers would find it interesting, and I would make a note about it, and we tried to get as many of those in there as we could. Any of those backyard
courses? Knollwood. Are any of those still around, the backyard courses?
No. Well, there's one that's still in the original location, but there's not. I don't think there's much of Langford left. Otto Kahn. Who was just a fabulously wealthy guy. He had one built for him. And then, what's that thing called? It's now called, I'm going to forget the name. They changed the name of it. It was essentially in the backyard of his mansion. The mansion is now like a convention center or something. It's out on Long Island. And, okay. And the golf course has been changed. So it's not what it was.
So you've mentioned it a couple times. Just tell me, an Eden. This is just personally for my own golf knowledge, because we know what a Redan, Biarritz, very obvious, a short, pretty obvious. Then people all talk about the Eden, and I go, which one was that?
Yeah. So the Eden is based off of the 11th hole at St. Andrews.
Eden River, right?
The one at St. Andrews on the old course is not called the Eden; it's called High Hole Inn. In the fundamental characteristic of an Eden is the green, which is sharp, steep, pitched sharply from back to front. And there were typically 2 or 3 bunkers. The one at St. Andrews, there's 3 bunkers, and most of the versions that Raynor or McDonald built would have at least the 2 bunkers on, front left and front right, and then the one that was even a little bit farther left. One of the bunkers is famous. That's the bunker that Bobby Jones hit it into his first time, as a young man playing at the old course, his first, attempt, to play in a tournament at the old course, and was playing badly and kind of frustrated by the whole differences between, links golf and what he was used to back in Atlanta. And the bunker on the Eden Green, short of the Eden Green, was where he couldn't get his ball out tried it a couple times, and depending on which version of the story, either tore up his scorecard or picked up his ball and quit the hole or whatever it was. But that was on the Eden Green. They're not. Most of the ones that Raynor builds are not as steep as the original one at St. Andrews. Tom Doak was nice enough to give me his thoughts on Seth Raynor and some of the ones he says the Eden Greens are the ones that are the hardest for him to when he's doing a redesign or he's doing a renovation at a Raynor golf course. He said they're the hardest ones for him to renovate because he always wants to build them like he knows the original was at St. Andrews, but that's not his job when he's renovating a golf course. It's to build it like back to what Seth Raynor originally intended for it. And I would say, the Edens are one where, he probably put a little more interest in the bunkering and the surroundings of the green as much as the slope. And he definitely didn't slope them as severely as the most of his Edens he built weren't nearly as sloped as severely as the original.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the Eden.
Got it. Now I know.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
So the Eden is the most common. So there's an Eden there's like two that don't have Eden greens or didn't originally have Eden greens.
Okay.
Every other, he would always build an Eden and he would always do a Redan. He would almost always also do a short and a Biarritz. Biarritz was the of the four, template par threes, the only one that he didn't use like every time or almost every time was the Biarritz. Most famously at National Golf Links America when they built their first course together, they didn't have a Biarritz there, but they pretty quickly would put a version. So most of the Raynor courses have four par threes, and they're usually those four templates.
So the Biarritz, how he applies it. Yeah, that's probably the easiest one to spot because it's got usually has a huge dip in the middle of it. The one at Yale is you could almost hide in a very deep valley, which would have come from. So Biarritz, there was a course in France. Is it still there? Is that where it came from? And is it true? I heard like the original one, like the dip was it actually in front of the green or maybe not on the green? Maybe I'm wrong. There's just a lot of
we don't know
stuff out there.
Yeah, and nobody knows. It no longer exists, and we don't know. I think conventional thinking these days is that they probably took McDonald probably got the idea from a couple of different features that he saw while he was down there. There was a famous hole, and there's a famous painting of it called the Chasm Hole at Biarritz. And Biarritz, by the way, was like a resort location. It's still there. And there's like 3 or 4 different golf courses that were all around, these resort hotels there. It was like it's a place where all the people, when they were getting out of Paris and going on vacation down to the coast, that's where they went. So the Chasm Hole is probably where they got the idea for this, dramatic forced carry, like at Yale. It's a one-shot hole, but it's kind of this, it's one of those where there's really no alternatives. You just got to pull out, what for them would have been a driver, and for most of us today is still a 3-wood or 4-iron or whatever. There's really no bailing out. That's part of it. The second part of it was, like you say, is the dip, and the thought is that's probably from a different hole. We don't know if that was at the same golf course. There's a hole that was kind of down on the beach below where the chasm is, and I've got a book from 1906, and there's some grainy photos and stuff in it. And you can kind of see some ideas of what where they would have maybe gotten those ideas from, but it's definitely, I would say it's the feature or the template hole, whatever word you want to use. That's probably the most they really are the ones that kind of perfected it and ended up should get the credit for that. I would say that one's one where you can't really point to one specific hole or one specific course in Europe and say that's where they got the idea. The chasm is maybe a start to the concept, but and the chasm hole was only there for a couple of years. They kept moving it farther and farther to make the shot easier, so it wouldn't be as much of a force carry. So yeah, it's it's always fun when you get to one for sure.
I've never seen the pin put down on the chasm anywhere, but I'm looking forward to that someday.
Yeah.
A great section in the book about the lost courses, the courses that were done and then have been, for any number of reasons. Mm-hmm. It's amazing to think of today that there would be a Seth Raynor golf course that was plowed under or a CB Macdonald golf course that was.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of them in the book. Which to you are the biggest tragedies among that sort of obituary page in the book?
Yeah. Tragedy is kind of a hard word for the golf course, but yeah, the ones I definitely
golf tragedies.
The links. So the links is it's just a fascinating part of kind of the CB Macdonald story, which is he has this club. The club is still in operation. It's still a very, very, very nice place to go have lunch in downtown New York City. And it was on the Upper East Side, and it was kind of designed as like a golf clubhouse, only in downtown Manhattan on the Upper East Side. And then they weren't, I found out through my research, they weren't directly related. So you weren't, just because you were a member at the city, clubhouse, doesn't mean you were also a member of the golf course that was just called the Links. But there was a huge overlap, obviously. And the Links was kind of built with the idea that, it was on Long Island, but it was, like 30 minutes from downtown Manhattan at the time. And the idea was it was a place where they could kind of run out and play, because these guys were all sickos that, with their golf. And it was a place where they could kind of play in the afternoon, when they had to like work, the next day. It was like a place they could play after work or hit balls or whatever, when they couldn't, because it was a long way all the way out to get out to Southampton and get out to National Golf Links of America or Shinnecock or Maidstone or wherever, these guys were playing their golf back then. And so the Links was one of several. Deepdale was another one where they built these clubs that were essentially just right on the outskirts of New York City. And the idea with these places, they were going to be like in-town clubs. And what hurt them obviously was the growth and the expansion of New York City and then the Long Island Expressway. Whenever you're building an expressway or you need land for just, municipal development, golf courses are always an attractive place for politicians and city planners to set their sights on, because it's a heck of a lot easier to destroy one golf course that belongs to some very wealthy people than it is to have to, buy up, 1,000 houses from people and negotiate with each family or whatever and eventually throw them out if they don't want to leave. It's a lot easier to just kind of use the golf courses to get 2 or 3 miles of routing over your new expressway at a time. So Long Island Expressway didn't do any favors for a couple of them. And there's several Seth Raynor courses like that. But I think the Links to me is so fascinating because it's just a lot of things with it. They had one greenskeeper and one pro the entire time. So both guys lasted for 50 years each, their careers at the Links Club. And you could only become a member if like you were a direct male descendant of an existing member. So like there was no mechanism to bring new members into the club, which obviously spelled its doom. I mean, there was no, there was no way to grow the club or to expand beyond just those original guys. So, if a guy's a member and he has 3 daughters like that, well, then now that's another, member down once he dies because there's nobody to replace him. Or if your son moves out to San Francisco or whatever and doesn't want to belong, or he doesn't play golf and doesn't want to belong to this club. So it was like doomed from day one. And it seems like they kind of didn't mind. I mean, it lasted a long time. They didn't finally sell it and plow it under and build houses until the 1970s. So it's kind of crazy, like you mentioned, like that there were Seth Raynor golf courses and CB Macdonald golf courses still around in the 1970s that somebody decided to build houses on and decided that was a good idea. And, that's one that's, fortunately some guys, Tom Doak being one of them, was allowed to play right before they closed, and he was able to take a set of photographs essentially from every green to tee to at least, document what it was like. But yeah, there's, there's 25 golf courses that Raynor built that are no longer there, that were fully operational. And, these weren't just, on a drawing board. These were courses that people played, and whether it was the Great Depression or World War II or, like I say, growth of the surrounding area and municipal planning or whatever it was, but we've lost 25 of them. And, so that's a shame. So yeah, each and every one of them I would have liked to play. So
for sure. It is a shame. It's fantastic that you do give them space in this book so that they will live on. Was this, as a collector, looking at your background and knowing your love of golf books and of golf club, as you said, specifically club histories, folks, if you wonder who reads those books, you're talking to him right now. It's Michael Wolf, collecting golf club histories. And so sitting down and saying, we're going to write the Seth Raynor. There isn't a definitive Seth Raynor book. We're going to do this. Was it intimidating? Did you feel pressure in it?
Yeah, it was fun. To be honest, it was fun. John's, he's easy to work for and work with, and Jim, like I say, was kind of the adult in the room, was trying to keep us focused on. He would have to remind us. I'd find this cool stuff that and we're lucky that there's a group of amateur, Seth Raynor researchers and guys that have just poured their lives into this. Mm-hmm. And most of them were very helpful, with questions that we had and, some advice on, where we could look. Or again, I'd love your thoughts on this, but a lot of it too was not just like finding stuff and writing it up, but also learning, like budgeting your time and your space in the book for like dead ends, to when you would, you kind of knew there was probably some more stuff in there, but realizing like, okay, like, you can't write a book for 20 years. Like at some point you gotta call it quits and get this thing to the publisher so they can be ready for people to buy it for Christmas or whatever. And that was always, that was tough for me. And I'm glad I had some help with that of somebody every once in a while tapping me on the shoulder and saying, hey, like that's enough about this course, or like, yes, that's interesting to you to I know you would like some more information about this, but we're trying to kind of make this also appealing to as broad of a audience as we can. And if you get too deep in the weeds, you almost kind of do a disservice to the readers, because they, there's probably not as many people out there that are going to hang into it, and you're just kind of slowing them down from enjoying what they want to enjoy about it. And so, there was a blend there of the commercial appeal to it, but also the personal, interest in some of the stuff.
No, those are great points. And I feel like you get to a point doing this where you start to realize when you're writing something for yourself, more so than for an audience. And I hope you become in tune with that as time goes on. But yeah, there's nothing. I mean, budgeting your time and dealing with, okay, where am I going too far in this direction, in that direction? Obviously, like we said, and editors huge in that regard. But it's also the reason that I've never, I'll confess something here, Michael. I've never gone back and read any of my books after they've been published. Because when you send them off and you say it's finished, right? Because there has to come that day. And, but I think any writer would say that I would be happy to spend the next 10 years working on this. Not happy, maybe go insane, but, where it, nothing, it's never ever really going to feel finished. And there's no way I could go back through a book right now and not want to change something. So I try to avoid that pain.
Yeah. How long did it take before there wasn't a pit in your stomach between, so from the time I sent the manuscript in until the time when like the first book, like bound, like, oh, here's the book, like those, whatever that was, 2 months in between, like the pit in my stomach of like, oh God, what have I done? Is anybody going to buy this? Like what, like, and then the pit. And then the second one, which is far worse, is like from when I've got the book and I've already seen like 5 typos in there, nothing major, but like typos in there.
Right.
But then I know it's going out to people, both people I know and respect. And I hope, will think that this was a worthy, effort, but also just like the general public and like, oh my God, like, somebody's going to start a webpage that says, fire Mike Wolf, and like just the whole, like kill, BamaBearcatStinks.com. So that's like, just, and I talked to a couple different guys that have done pieces and whatever. And they said, some of them are like, it is what it is. Like I did the best I could. And then some of them are like, oh, it never goes away. I worry about it every day. So.
No, it's a terrifying thing to put something out there into the world. Right. And, and especially when, like you said, first editions are called first editions for a reason. No matter how many times they go through the copy editor, there's always something in there that is going to just blow, that you might be the only one who notices, but will absolutely break your heart. So sometimes you find them and sometimes someone else finds them.
Yeah. And like you said, kind of, you got to know when to say when, and you just got to live with it with just the fact that like, so much more of the research material now is, it's coming online and it's searchable in old newspapers and things like that. I mean, this book wouldn't have been as good if we had tried to do it 10 years ago. And I'm sure 10 years from now, there will be, more information on several of these courses that would have been interesting to know, or something that we thought was correct that's been proven otherwise, I'm still hopeful that there's some courses out there that I don't know about. I'm still hopeful that somebody somewhere is going to say, oh, I've got this old newspaper that, Seth Raynor was at our club. We don't know about it, and I don't think that's available right now, but maybe in 5 years or 10 years, something will turn up. And I think that was part of the interest for me as well, that so many of these courses are, diving farther into their histories and want to know and researching, and people are still finding routing maps from Seth Raynor. Just in the last 10 years, 15 years, there's been a couple of them that have been found at clubs, in the clubhouse or, at the local surveyor's office or whatever. So yeah, it makes me optimistic that, maybe there will be a revised and expanded edition in 10 years. Who knows?
There you go. That would be fantastic. We can come on and talk about that as well. Michael, I can't thank you enough, one, for the book. It's a tremendous resource. It's fun. It's a fun book to read. You can tell you guys had fun with it, doing it. Yeah. Before you go, I'll just ask you sort of where we started with Charles Blair Macdonald. As you'd mentioned, a man of strong opinions and ideas about how the game should be played. What do you think he would think of golf in 2023?
I think he would be appalled at the pace of play, for sure. I think he was a pretty practical guy, and so I think the expense of it, I think he'd be pretty disappointed with some of the stuff in the United States. I think there's other things he would probably enjoy about it, or at least, an enlightened version of him with the amount of young people playing and females playing and all that stuff, would be, I think he would, I hope he would be encouraging of that. I know Seth Raynor would have been. But the cost and the pace of play in the United States, we have to do better. I think we're trending in the right direction, and I remain optimistic. I mean, there's, is Florida ever going to turn into Fife, Scotland? Probably not, as far as pace of play and cost and things like that. But we're making strides. Like I say, just the fact that a knucklehead like me, who grew up as a caddy, in Cincinnati, Ohio, has weaseled his way onto 50 or 60 of these golf courses is a testament to things improving in golf. Because if it was 1950, that would not have happened, I don't think, or even 30 or 40 years ago. And I found that especially among the Raynors in the Macdonald courses, that there's some real pride there, and in a willingness to share and kind of open things up. And I think that, like I said, I think that trend is continuing more and more and more. That if you really, really want to see a golf course, there are more ways to find your way on there. It might not be the cheapest, and it might not be at the time of year you're hoping for, whatever. You got to be a little flexible on these things. But I am a little bit optimistic, at least, that when it comes to golden age golf, that the stakeholders or the caregivers of these places are more willing to show it off, more now than ever. I mean, you can whether it's the stuff you guys do or some of the other folks out there in the media landscape. I think it's awesome. Some of the features that you guys are able to write and some of the events you're able to host at some of these courses. So yeah, I think he would enjoy that and be, optimistic about that. We just got to play faster. We got to play faster. Move it along.
Amen.
Yeah.
And that's the perfect note to leave on. We have to play faster. Yeah. Absolutely. Michael, I can't thank you enough for the time. Congratulations on the book. Everyone check it out. The Golf Courses of Seth Raynor. And always follow Bama Bearcat and Links Gems. Always interesting stuff coming. So thanks so much. We'll talk soon.